She's dead because you couldn't wait, and now you want to pretend my wife wasn't disabled? I said it loud, not for Melinda's benefit, but so the neighbors watching from behind their hedges would hear every word. Melinda Gratch, president of the Black Ridge Dunes HOA, didn't even blink. Her clipboard was steady, her mouth twisted in that smug little curve I'd seen 100 times before, usually right before a threat. She was unsecured, she said. Not our fault she chose to sit in an unapproved fixture. Unapproved. That balcony was her body. That lift was her spine. And Melinda had sent a crew to tear it down while I was out for groceries. Rhea had gone out early, like always, to feel the sun, the wind, the only kind of movement she had left. She never stood a chance. They tampered with load-bearing fasteners, I said, and I built the torque sensors myself. So, unless you can explain why your crew disabled a Level 1 ADA-mandated safety system, we both know what you just did. Melinda's smile flickered for the first time. Not fear, not yet. But surprise. The kind you see in someone who realizes their script is out of date. If you've ever watched an HOA weaponize rules until someone got hurt, hit subscribe. This isn't a complaint, it's a forensic record. My name is Dorian Vellon, and I don't just build structures, I audit failure. I'm a structural systems analyst. I spent a decade designing ADA-compliant rescue modules for disaster zones, field teaching engineers after hurricanes, fires, and combat demolitions. After Rhea's accident, I quit the field. She needed a home that would move when she couldn't. So I made it. Bolt by bolt, line by line, every inch of it compliant with federal law and impossible to argue against. Except Melinda didn't argue. She waited, circled, issued violation notices over color shades, cable lengths, the curve of the support arms. Last week she sent an HOA bulletin claiming visual obstruction concerns. I knew what was coming. Rhea knew it too. That's why she said it. Don't let them take it down, she whispered before I left that morning. If they win, it means I was never here. She wasn't talking about the railing or the recliner or the lift anchors. She meant the way she lived, the quiet dignity, the independence she fought for after the surgeries, the lawsuits, the stairs. She decorated that balcony in blue and copper because it reminded her of the cliffside in Big Sur where we said our vows. The corner she loved most caught the morning light, and the winds were calmest just before 8 a.m. That's when they did it. A crew, no helmets, no tag, no permits, showed up with bolt cutters and a cordless drill. One guy glanced at the balcony, saw her reclined, maybe thought she'd move. The lift locked automatically. It had to lock. She was strapped in, half paralyzed. The moment they dislodged the top bracket, the platform rotated forward and split like wet wood across the retaining wall. I got the text 3 minutes later. Something's happening outside. I was 8 minutes away. When I pulled in, the ambulance was already closing its doors. The platform was half folded, splintered, mangled on the stonework. Rhea's body was under a sheet, face down, her arm still through the wheelchair strap. Melinda was giving statements to the HOA secretary and pretending not to notice me. That's when I said it. She's dead because you couldn't wait, and now you want to pretend my wife wasn't disabled? The silence afterward told me everything. None of them expected a fight. Not the board. Not the enforcers. Not the cowards behind their blinds who watched the lift fall and said nothing. But they forgot something. Rhea's brother, Logan Marek, is a Navy SEAL, and 10 minutes after Rhea hit the rocks, he walked up the drive holding her coffee, the one she'd asked for that morning in the last message she ever sent. He didn't know yet. He would. And when he did, I wouldn't have to say a word. Because this time, we weren't going to court. We were going to war, with evidence, timestamps, and a story that would make the entire state watch Black Ridge Dunes burn. The silence didn't last long. Within an hour, the HOA board had issued a community-wide bulletin titled Incident at Lot 14, Safety Reminder and Ongoing Investigation. It was written in soft legalese and smoothed over lies, phrases like unforeseen equipment failure, unapproved modifications, and unfortunate consequence of non-standard installations. They didn't even say her name. Rhea wasn't a consequence. She was the most deliberate person I'd ever known. Every color, every bracket, every inch of that balcony was chosen with a reason. The bolts had been powder-coated blue to match her wheelchair. The The tilt sensors were weather-sealed twice because she hated how the salt fog warped the data. She didn't just sit on that platform, she lived on it. It was her shoreline, her escape. Our friends joked that she spent more time suspended in the breeze than grounded in the house. That was the point. The HOA never liked it. They never said it directly. Always concerns, always visual standards, always some clause about uniformity that let them attack what they couldn't control. It started 8 months ago when Melinda Gratch flagged us for decorative protrusion beyond 3 feet. That was the awning we installed to shade the medical lift control panel. Then came the warning about unauthorized vertical elevation devices. Even though ours was manually operated, solar-backed, and fully within ADA specs, we fought it every time, and every time we won, they got pettier. Last week, Melinda issued her sharpest memo yet. It read, "All structural extensions must be subject to immediate reassessment should a reasonable concern for community, safety, or aesthetics be raised by any board member." Translation? If Melinda felt like something didn't look right, she could act. No permits, no inspections, just a written statement and a crew on the way. That memo came the same day Calvin Dreel, HOA treasurer, stood on the sidewalk during our morning routine and refused to make eye contact. Rhea had waved. He half nodded. I didn't think much of it then, but now I remembered the clipboard in his hand and the tightness in his jaw. He was there today too, again standing off to the side, eyes hollow as the medic zipped the bag. I caught him staring at the corner where the bracket snapped. His fingers gripped the hem of his shirt until the knuckles went white. When Melinda barked something at him, he didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the board office like he was carrying a secret too heavy to keep standing under. I didn't chase him, not yet. Instead, I spent the next hour at the wreckage. The HOA had already begun cordoning off the area, probably to tamper with what they could before an investigator arrived. But I knew the codes. I knew how to stall them. This platform is federally compliant under ADA Section 206.7.9, I told the private maintenance guy who'd been sent to clear the debris. Touch any part of it before the city investigator arrives, and I'll personally file a restraint violation under federal housing statutes. He didn't argue, just looked over his shoulder and made a call. The damage was clean. Too clean. No cracks in the bolt. No visible stress tear. Just a sudden, total dismount, which meant the fasteners had been loosened, not snapped. The lock ring was missing, not fallen, removed. That was when I knew. It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't even just negligence. It was an ambush. The railing was intentionally sabotaged, and Rhea had been sitting there, trusting it would hold like it always had, like I told her it would. Later that night, I sat alone in the kitchen where her tea mug still sat steeping cold, reading every HOA bulletin from the last 3 months, cross-referencing timestamps against system pings from the balcony sensors. One entry jumped out, logged precisely 7:41 a.m., the time I estimate the bolts were dislodged. Scheduled routine inspection of Lot 14, platform assessment in progress. Confirmed board-approved action. That wasn't an inspection, it was a hit. Calvin Dreel didn't look up when I stepped into the HOA board office the next morning. He was behind the front desk, not in the boardroom, flipping through a maintenance ledger with the nervous intensity of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. The air smelled like toner and denial. The security camera above the door blinked once, then dimmed. I counted 5 beats before he spoke. "We're not taking walk-ins today, Mr. Vellon." His voice was even, too even, like he'd rehearsed it. Like he'd practiced every phrase that might delay what he knew was coming. His hand moved to close the book, but I was already at the desk. "You were there," I said. "You saw her fall." That got him. He flinched, lips parting like he meant to argue, then pressed them together instead. His eyes flicked toward the back hallway, toward Melinda's office, and then dropped to the counter again. That small movement told me more than anything he might have said. "You knew they were coming," I continued. "You had the clipboard, the one with the new removal schedule. You stood outside our fence yesterday morning and wouldn't even look at her. She wasn't supposed to be on it," he whispered. "They said no one would be outside, that it was just a test, no bracket removal, just visual notes. Melinda told the crew to flag the bolts but not touch them. But they did." He nodded once, tightly, still not looking at me. Because someone changed the order, I said. No reply. I dropped the printed log onto the desk, highlighted with the 7:41 a.m. timestamp from the HOA inspection registry. His fingers twitched. I watched the color drain from his face as he read the line I'd circled in red. Confirmed board-approved action. Not a test, not a visual note. That line was entered into the log as the bracket was being pulled. Calvin turned the page like it might disappear if he looked long enough. I waited. Let the silence harden between us until he finally cracked. She called me that morning. His voice was softer now, shaky. "Rhea?" I asked. He nodded. I didn't answer. She'd left me a message, said something felt off, said she saw a red van circling the block twice. I felt something catch in my throat. Rhea had always noticed patterns. She saw details I missed. She probably recognized the contractor before he even parked. She trusted you, Calvin. I know. He sounded like a man dragging every word through a battlefield. I didn't vote for the removal, he added quickly. Melinda added it to the schedule after the meeting ended, said it was provisional, pending board signature. I thought she'd wait. You thought she'd obey federal housing law? I snapped. You thought a woman who spent 6 months finding my wife over the color of her sun hat would suddenly grow a conscience? His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. She needed a unanimous vote, I said. No, just 2/3, and she got it. Marcus and Jody signed without even reading it. I stalled, said I had questions. She said she'd pull the file until next week. And then she forged the confirmation? I didn't see it until today. He pushed another file toward me. It's backdated, but it's fake. I didn't approve that line. There it was, the fracture, the pressure point. Calvin wasn't innocent, but he wasn't hardened either. He was caught, complicit through silence, and now, maybe, scared enough to act. Help me, I said low, before she scrubs everything, before this becomes a tragedy and not a crime. Help me prove Rhea didn't fall. She was dropped. He looked at me then, really looked, not as the widower, not as the guy who filed too many ADA complaints, but as a man staring down the aftermath of his own cowardice. I have the maintenance logs, he said quietly, and the board memos, even the draft Melinda deleted before yesterday's bulletin went out. I didn't ask why he kept them. I didn't care. You'll get them to me? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded once, just enough to count. Outside, the wind rose off the ocean. Somewhere down the block, Melinda was already preparing her next version of events. But Calvin Dreel had just crossed the line. By the time I got home, the warning was already taped to my front door. Final notice, non-compliant structure. Debris must be removed within 24 hours to avoid sanction. It was signed personally by Melinda Gratch, stamped with the HOA seal, and printed on paper so thick it felt like arrogance. The ink wasn't even smudged. She'd sent someone to place it here, knowing I was still identifying my wife's remains 2 hours earlier. I stood there holding the notice, knuckles tightening around the corners, while the pieces of Rhea's platform still lay scattered across the patio, like broken ribs. No cleanup crew had come, no city inspector had taken photos, no crime scene tape. Just raw wood, twisted frame metal, and silence. And now they wanted me to dispose of it. A neighbor's screen door creaked open across the street. Mr. Linwood, 2 houses down, stepped halfway onto his porch and then paused. His gaze moved to the platform wreckage, then to me, then back down at his shoes. They all saw it, but none of them would say it. I walked inside, locked the door, and dropped the notice on the kitchen table beside Rhea's phone. Her last message was still open. He's 5 minutes away. Bring him in slow. Logan doesn't trust surprises. I had nothing left to say to the screen. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the lift's firmware dashboard. The security module had gone dark just after 7:43 a.m., but there were pings before that. Weight calibration logs, recline motor data. And right at 7:39, a sudden increase in vibration recorded on the lateral mounts. 4 seconds later, the emergency brake attempted to engage, and failed. The platform's safety mechanism had been manually overridden. Someone triggered the lift's inspection mode, which disabled autolock. Not a bug, not a system fault, a command. I clicked deeper. Each diagnostic flag came with a signature code. The override command had been entered on site. That meant a device, likely a tablet or direct uplink, had executed the bypass using a field protocol I designed myself 6 years ago for rapid maintenance training in post-hurricane shelters. That command wasn't public, only 3. People in the community had the default access level to use it: me, the emergency contractor I trained for the city, and the HOA vendor Melinda hired last quarter without review. And I still had his number. I found it buried in an old HOA email attachment, a contractor roster Melinda had attached to a proposal in March. One entry stood out: Ralph Decker, external structure and code compliance partner, no license number, no inspection credentials, but listed as on call for urgent enforcement. I tapped the call button before I could second guess it. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Yeah? This is Dorian Vellon. You touched my platform yesterday." Silence. "I know what you did," I continued. "I know you bypassed the safety. I built the code. I wrote the command. I can trace the signature back to the exact device you used. Hey man, I don't know what you think. I think you better start listening, because if I file this evidence packet with the state ADA enforcement office and attach your name, you won't just lose your next contract, you'll lose everything." He breathed hard into the phone, a cough, a muttered curse. "She told me no one would be on it," he said finally. "She said it was empty, that the guy, you, built it wrong and she just needed photos to prove it." "But you didn't just take photos." She handed me the tablet, said to run the quick test mode. I figured it was a routine override. She said the structure was flagged as abandoned. It wasn't. "I see that now." His voice had dropped. I waited, let it hang. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," he said quietly. "She wasn't just anyone." I ended the call. Then I opened the HOA's digital complaint portal and submitted a request. Formal investigation into unsafe board-sanctioned equipment tampering, contractor negligence, and a violating interference resulting in fatality. Attached were 3 files: the firmware override log, the signature code from the tablet session, and a screen capture of Melinda's email naming Ralph Decker as her on-call structural partner. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with the patio lights off, the shattered frame of Ria's balcony still visible under the moonlight. The wind coming off the water should have felt clean, but the air was thick, like the whole street was holding its breath. At 2:13 a.m., a vehicle pulled up slow outside the house. No headlights, just a low idle, a dull hum under the sound of waves. I stood without hesitation, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. It was Logan. He stepped out of the truck without a word. He looked thinner than I remembered. Lean muscle, sharper jawline, eyes that hadn't rested in years. He held a paper coffee cup, probably out of habit, and stared at the wreckage like he hadn't seen it until now. "She was still on it," I said. He nodded once. I figured. "She texted you before it happened. You know that, right?" "I read it while they loaded her body into the coroner van," he said. "I was 10 minutes late." "You weren't late," I told him. "They were early." He walked past me, crouched by the remnants of the bracket mount, and ran his hand along the fracture line. His fingers stopped at the clean thread of the bolt. "This wasn't wear," he muttered. "This was torque shear, controlled, deliberate. I know, I ran the logs. Someone entered the override protocol I wrote years ago for emergency compliance inspections." He looked up. "How many people knew that protocol?" 3, one's me. One's the guy Melinda Gratch contracted last quarter. The third's a FEMA trainer who retired 2 years ago in Nebraska. So it was the vendor. "Ralph Decker?" Logan stood slowly. He stared out toward the sea, the wind tugging at his sleeves. I could see it in his face. He wasn't processing grief the way I was. His was compartmentalized, filed, sorted, shelved behind operational gears that never stopped turning. "She died thinking they won," he said. "No," I said. "She died thinking I'd stop them." We stood in silence for a long time before I brought him inside. At the table, I laid out everything: digital logs, printed bulletins, timestamp overlays, firmware pings, and Calvin's copy of the fake approval memo. Logan didn't ask questions. He just read, took notes in shorthand, the kind of operational notation you only learn through repetition under stress. "Where's the weak point?" I asked finally. He tapped the HOA roster with Melinda's name circled. "Here, she's cocky. She thinks she's in control, but she's already used too many unauthorized contractors. If we can prove Ralph Decker acted under her direct orders, and that he initiated a federal safety override without required credentials, we can bypass HOA arbitration and go straight to a state-level ADA enforcement petition. I already submitted a request through their digital portal, I said. He raised an eyebrow. That won't get traction without pressure. They'll file it under civil matter and wait until the news cycle moves on. You want results? We make it public. I was afraid you'd say that. Don't be, he said. We're not making noise. We're building a case the public can't ignore. I hesitated. You really think people will care? Logan stared at the crushed recliner outside the window. They will if we show them who she was. We spent the next 3 hours organizing the footage. I still had the lift's internal camera logs, short clips that activated when Rhea used the controls. There was one from 2 mornings before she died, where she laughed at the birds diving into the water and said, "They always miss the first try, but they never give up." Logan paused it, rewound, played it again. "That's your hook," he said. "That's where we start." When the sun came up, I watched him load everything onto a drive labeled Proof of Negligence, Felon. He handed me a second labeled Broadcast Asset Master. "What's this?" "A message," he said. "From her. To them." I didn't go outside that day, not even to breathe. Instead, I sat in front of my screen with the drive Logan handed me and watched every file, one by one. They weren't just logs or evidence. He'd spent the night compiling Rhea's moments, footage pulled from our security system, lift-mounted clips, a few videos she'd recorded herself. Some were only seconds long, her laughing at the gulls, adjusting the tilt of her sun hat, the time she read poetry to herself and didn't know the camera was active. Then came the video I hadn't seen. It was dated 2 weeks before her death. She was reclined on the lift, hair tied back in that messy loop she always wore when she was thinking. Her voice was quiet, tired, but certain. "If anything happens, and I don't mean a fall, I mean if someone pushes too far, don't let them write the story. I want the truth, and I want them to see what it cost." I paused it. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. Then I hit play again and let the rest unfold. She detailed every citation, every time Melinda sent notices during her recovery, the fine for the non-neutral porch blanket, the time she got written up for lingering too long on the edge of the property line, which really meant enjoying her coffee too close to the walkway while in her chair. Rhea didn't leave a goodbye. She left a warning. By the time Logan returned that afternoon, I had already uploaded the full video to a cloud lockbox, encrypted the backup, and drafted a statement for the ADA Shield Coalition's anonymous whistleblower portal. He reviewed it line by line, then nodded once. "You ready?" he asked. "No." "Good. Means you're serious." He placed a stack of printed papers in front of me. I scanned them. Names, violations, dates. "These are the board members who authorized Melinda's discretionary clause," he said. "We're not just going after her. We're pulling the whole route. How'd you get this?" I called in a favor from a guy I worked with in Afghanistan. He does forensic policy analysis now. Already scraped the HOA's internal update system and cross-referenced every amendment pushed without full board vote. I blinked. "You did that today?" I didn't say he was slow. I leaned back, exhaling hard. "I have Calvin's logs. I've got the override timestamps and the contractor's confirmation. What I don't have is anyone willing to speak publicly." "You do now," Logan said. "Calvin left this in your mailbox." He handed me a plain flash drive in an envelope. No note, just a drive. I plugged it in with caution, expecting maybe scanned memos or inspection forms. Instead, I found a single video file. Calvin sat in his car, eyes hollow. You could hear rain hitting the windshield. His voice trembled, but the words were sharp. "My name is Calvin Dreel. I serve as treasurer of the Black Ridge Dunes HOA. On the morning of the 12th, I witnessed unauthorized removal procedures initiated at Lot 14 without proper documentation. I did not approve the order, nor was I informed that the resident, Rhea Velen, was present during the event. I believe this action directly led to her death. I am submitting this in case I disappear from the next meeting." I closed the file slowly. So now we had a second voice, a crack in the wall. And it wouldn't be long before Melinda felt the pressure. The bulletin she sent that morning already reeked of desperation, citing ongoing misinformation and promising a full internal audit. Translation: damage control. She knew something was coming, but not from where. Logan stepped outside for a call. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the drive like it was a live wire. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a signal. We were done collecting evidence. No more paperwork, no more log lines or bulletin timelines. It was time to speak, and Ria's voice would be the first thing they heard. The envelope Calvin dropped off wasn't sealed. No return address, just my name printed on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside was a second flash drive, smaller than the last. Black casing, no markings. I plugged it in half, expecting a virus, but it opened instantly. There were 3 files. One was a PDF memo dated 2 days before Ria's death, titled Emergency Compliance Enforcement, Lot 14. The other was a timestamped screenshot from the HOA board portal, showing Melinda's admin account modifying the inspection schedule at 6:32 a.m. The third was a voicemail recording. I clicked play. "Calvin, this is Melinda. I need you to push through the override tonight. I'll handle the paperwork later. It's just a visual test. I've cleared it with Marcus and Jody. Don't drag your feet on this. We've already had 2 neighbor complaints and the board expects action. No more delays." Her voice was clipped, controlled, no hesitation. It wasn't the voice of someone discussing safety. It was the voice of someone preparing a cleanup. I forwarded the files to Logan without a word. He replied a minute later. "That's your detonator. Get ready." We met that night in the empty break room of the Veterans Resource Center 2 towns over. It was Logan's idea, quiet, neutral ground, off the HOA's radar. He'd already brought in 2 allies, a retired ADA compliance officer and a local veteran who worked in community housing litigation. They listened while I laid out everything: logs, voice memos, videos, false memos, override signatures. The compliance officer barely blinked. The housing advocate took notes like she was building a legal grenade. "This is solid," she said finally. "But if you want public impact, we need emotion. Story first, data second." "She left a message," I said. "A video. Use it." Logan opened his laptop and began assembling the final cut. Ria's voice layered over the crash footage, the falsified memos timed against HOA bulletin statements. The advocate added commentary. The compliance officer added legal context. By midnight, we had a full 3-minute clip formatted and ready, clean captions, clear visuals. It opened with Ria smiling under the sun, her voice calm. "They told me I was a hazard. I just wanted fresh air." Then, the collapse. The timeline. Melinda's voice saying, "No more delays." We titled it, Black Ridge Dunes, The Cost of Silence. The plan was simple. Step 1. Send the video and supporting evidence to the ADA Shield Coalition's whistleblower team with a demand for immediate legal review. Step 2. Email the video to every news outlet covering local housing issues, along with a short written testimony from me and a copy of Calvin's confession. Step 3. Launch the clip across all major platforms using Ria's own name, story, and voice, under one hashtag, unhinged wheelchair. Wager World. Step 4. Let the internet do what it does best. Logan looked at me one last time before uploading. "You sure?" I wasn't. Not really, but I nodded anyway. She asked me to make sure they didn't get to write her ending. And then he clicked upload. Within minutes, the video was live on Ada Shield's main page, forwarded to their 90,000 subscriber newsletter, and mirrored to 4 national housing watchdog accounts. Logan's contact inside the coalition's media team had already prepared a press release. The compliance officer sent notice to the state's ADA Enforcement Division, and the housing advocate. She filed a formal petition to the city demanding emergency oversight of the Black Ridge Dunes, HOA. At 2:37 a.m., the HOA board site crashed from too much traffic. By 2:42, local reporters began emailing me. By 3:04, its wheelchair Wager World was trending statewide. And Melinda, she had no idea yet. The sun hadn't even broken the horizon when the first reporter called, then another. By 6 a.m., my inbox was flooded with interview requests, legal inquiries, and cold, sharp messages from other HOA victims who recognized Melinda's voice in the leaked voicemail. Someone had stitched together a list of enforcement memos she'd signed across multiple neighborhoods in the past 10 years. The term pattern of abuse had already surfaced in 3 separate email threads. Logan called it Phase 1, awareness saturation. He stayed calm, working through the timeline with brutal efficiency, scrubbing our releases of anything libelous, coordinating with ADA Shield's legal team, syncing timestamps between the override logs and Calvin's confession to build an airtight chain of intent. He wasn't emotional. That wasn't his job. He was the scalpel, the one who made sure when the cut came, it was clean. I was the bleeding heart. And that's exactly what the public responded to. By mid-morning, news trucks were circling the entrance to Black Ridge Dunes, blocked by the gate. HOA board members had already begun ducking calls. The Black Ridge Dunes Facebook group went from suburban recipe swaps to open warfare, comments disabled, posts deleted, admins silent. Melinda? She issued a statement by noon. It was short, cold, typed in boldface and uploaded to the HOA portal. Recent claims circulating on social media contain misrepresentations and inaccuracies that mischaracterize the intentions and procedures of the board. We are cooperating with all relevant authorities to address this matter appropriately. The board remains committed to maintaining a safe and aesthetically pleasing community for all residents. There was no apology, no name, no mention of Rhea, just sanitized lies. By 2:15 p.m., we launched Phase 2. We posted the original inspection logs Melinda had altered, side by side with Calvin's unedited versions. Logan uploaded a breakdown video with diagram overlays and command line captures of the firmware override. The housing advocate released a public legal explainer pointing out every violation, line by line, with references to federal codes. The final nail came from an unexpected direction. A woman named Elena Caldwell, a former board member from Melinda's last HOA, posted a 2-minute clip on her own account saying, Melinda Gratch drove out 4 disabled residents from our old community by citing visual disruption and non-compliant modifications. Rhea wasn't her first target, just the one who fought too hard to scare. That clip was picked up by a veterans group, then reshared by a state senator who quote tweeted it with, ADA violations are not aesthetic debates. They are civil rights violations. Expect hearings. Melinda was finished, but she didn't know it yet. At 4:06 p.m., Logan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then handed it to me. Unknown number, voicemail. We played it on speaker. It was Calvin. His voice was strained, shaky. She's calling board members, off the record, telling them to deny they saw anything, saying the contractor acted alone. She's going to throw Ralph under the bus, says he bypassed the system without consent and forged her approval memo. But I checked the timestamp metadata. The edit came from her IP address, logged into the admin panel. She's lying, and I've got proof. I'll send it tonight. Keep the pressure on. I looked at Logan. She's unraveling, he said. She's desperate, I corrected. And desperate people make mistakes. He nodded once. That's what we need. That night, we held off publishing anything new. Let the weight settle. Let the community breathe under it. The silence was part of the plan. By morning, people would start asking why no one from the board had shown their face. And when they did, that's when we dropped the final cut. The next morning, we let the silence hang. No updates, no tweets, no press statements. Just the weight of truth rippling through a community that had spent years pretending compliance was safety and silence was peace. By mid-morning, the HOA email server crashed again. Members were calling each other. Half the neighborhood Facebook group turned into screenshots and reposts of the video we'd leaked. Some neighbors wrote to apologize. Others panicked. But the most important shift was quiet, barely noticeable. Nobody defended Melinda anymore. At 11:12 a.m., I got a text from Calvin. She's calling an emergency board meeting. Says it's private. Starts at 1 p.m. Logan didn't flinch when I showed him the message. He just reached into his bag and pulled out a folded stack of petition forms, names, addresses, statements. At the top of each page was the logo of the ADA Shield Coalition. 34 residents, he said, all demanding oversight and investigation, all delivered to the state office this morning. And the media? They're watching the gate. We didn't go in through the front. That wasn't the plan. We parked a block away, walked along the access trail that curved behind the HOA Community Center. The meeting was inside the glass-walled conference room, Melinda's fortress. We moved quietly, keeping to the hedges until we found the small service door Calvin said he'd leave unlocked. He kept his word. Inside, the hallway was empty. The meeting was already underway. We could hear voices through the glass, raised and frantic. Melinda's was sharpest. "This is a coordinated smear campaign," she snapped. "Nothing more. I've already spoken to legal. They're going to send a cease and desist to ADA Shield today." "They're not backing down," a voice replied. I didn't recognize it. "The senator shared the video. The city's already investigating the override incident." "Then deny it," she said. "Say it was forged. Say it was spliced." Calvin's voice cut in then, quiet but clear. "I watched you type the override command, Melinda. It was your login, your IP." Silence followed, then a crash. Logan touched my arm. I nodded, stepped forward, and opened the door. Everyone froze. Melinda's hand was still on her water glass, which had just tipped over. Marcus and Jody, the two board members who'd co-signed the removal memo, looked like they'd seen a ghost. Calvin just lowered his eyes and said nothing. "I thought this was a private meeting," Melinda said, venom slipping into her tone. "It was," I said, "but someone invited us. You have no right to—" "We have every right." Logan's voice cut through the room like a drawn blade. "You initiated a fatal override using a non-credentialed vendor, ignored ADA compliance protections, falsified documentation, intimidated board members into silence, and attempted to suppress digital evidence." Marcus pushed back from the table. "Is this true?" "Don't be dramatic," Melinda said. "They're twisting it." "You lied to us," Jody said, her voice cracking. "You said the inspection was visual only. You said no action would be taken without another vote." Melinda glared at her. "You didn't read what you signed." "I trusted you." "No," Calvin said quietly. We all feared her, but not anymore. Logan stepped forward and dropped the signed petitions onto the center of the table. 34 residents have demanded your removal," he said. "The ADA Shield Coalition has filed formal charges with the state. Your override command has been matched to your personal login. And the press is outside." Melinda stood slowly, spine rigid, mouth curled into the same smile she wore the day Rhea died. "This is a vendetta," she said. "Nothing more. And when this dies down—" "It won't," I said, "because the thing you tried to destroy is already louder than you, and she's not done speaking yet." Outside, we heard the growing sound of reporters gathering beyond the glass. Inside, Melinda Gratch sat down and said nothing. The press conference wasn't ours. It was theirs, the HOA board's, scheduled for the following morning. Short notice, no questions. They called it a community update. But the moment we saw the memo, we knew what it really was: containment. Melinda was going to try to bury everything under process, slow it down, drag it into committee, let the public rage fade and replace it with procedural fog. Maybe even cast herself as the misunderstood official who was simply enforcing standards, while the details were still under review. Logan looked at the bulletin and laughed once, dry, short, no humor in it. "She's buying time." I nodded. "And she thinks we'll wait." We didn't. By noon, the ADA Shield Coalition had confirmed receipt of the full evidence packet: override logs, backdated memos, Calvin's confession, and the contractor's verbal admission. A preliminary ethics complaint had been filed against the HOA board, with Melinda named as the central figure. But Logan didn't care about complaints. He wanted something stronger. "You know what she fears more than the state?" he asked me. "Losing control of the narrative." "Exactly. So we built something she couldn't control." Logan took the 3-minute video we had leaked, Rhea's voice, the override, the time-stamped logs, and broke it into smaller clips. Each one under 60 seconds, each one ending on a question. Who gets to decide what safety looks like? When a disabled woman is punished for being visible, what does that say about us? Why was ADA law ignored for the sake of visual harmony? Then he uploaded them one by one. Not to the coalition, not to the lawyers, but to the neighborhood's private messaging channels, community apps, and group chats. The places where people vented, where rumors spread faster than truth ever could. By the time the press conference began at 9 a.m., nearly every household in Black Ridge Dunes had seen at least one clip, and they showed up angry, not violent, not loud, but present. Dozens stood outside the HOA center, phones in hand, silent. Reporters circled, cameras caught the tension through the glass. Inside, Melinda stepped up to the podium wearing a navy blue blazer and the tightest smile I'd ever seen. She adjusted her notes, cleared her throat, and began. This board remains committed to the safety and unity of our community. Recent incidents have caused confusion and distress, and for that, we are deeply saddened. We acknowledge the tragic accident that occurred at Lot 14 and extend our thoughts to the Vellon family. She paused, waited. No one clapped, no one moved. She shifted in place. Due to ongoing investigations and out of respect for legal protocol, the board cannot comment on the specifics at this time. However, we are conducting a full internal audit and will work closely with our legal advisors to ensure compliance with all local and federal standards. She smiled again. The kind of smile that wants permission. She didn't get it. Because at that moment, Logan stepped into the back of the room and set down a small portable speaker. Ria's voice filled the space. They told me I was a hazard. I just wanted fresh air. Melinda froze. Her eyes locked on the speaker as if it had materialized from thin air. The video played through once, then again, then stopped. No one said a word, until Jody stood from her seat at the table, folded her copy of Melinda's statement, and placed it down without a sound. "I won't be part of this," she said, then walked out the side door. Marcus followed, so did another board member, and then Calvin, last to rise, stood, turned to the cameras, and spoke one line. "She wasn't a hazard, we were." That footage hit every news cycle by afternoon. By nightfall, Melinda's resignation was trending second only to the clip of Ria's voice. Melinda didn't leave the building. Even after the press conference ended in silence, even after half the board walked out on live broadcast, she stayed in that glass-walled room with the blinds drawn. Her car remained parked in the same corner of the HOA lot, untouched. The office lights burned into the evening, and still she didn't move. But the neighborhood did. By sundown, the gates of Black Ridge Dunes were crowded with quiet fury, not chaos, just presence. People standing shoulder to shoulder, some with candles. Others holding copies of the ADA notice Ria kept posted near the balcony, section 206.7.9, printed on white paper, laminated in case of rain. No one needed to speak. The silence was the statement. Inside, Logan and I prepared for the final step. The final cut. We had saved the last piece, the one clip Ria had recorded but never showed me. It was stored in a protected folder on the lift's firmware hub. The video had a timestamp from a month before her death. But it wasn't a warning. It wasn't evidence. It was her truth. She was seated on the lift, blue blanket around her legs, ocean wind pushing stray strands of hair across her face. She looked tired, yes, but steady. Her voice was softer than usual. "They think making me invisible is the same as making things clean. But I built this place, not the street, not the walls, this, the space I can breathe in. The freedom to be seen without permission. If they ever take it, I want you to show them I was never ashamed to be here. No bitterness, no anger, just clarity." We uploaded it at 7:04 p.m., and this time, we didn't send it through advocacy groups or media partners. We projected it right onto the side of the HOA building. The video played across the glass like firelight, flickering across the blinds where Melinda still sat. Her name never appeared. Her voice wasn't needed. Only Ria's, stretching across the lawn in waves, carried by wind and speaker hum. Neighbors stepped closer. Phones rose again. This time, not to film a scandal, but to record her. To carry her words where she couldn't. Behind us, news vans rolled in. Reporters whispered. One camera caught Calvin standing on the sidewalk in the same blue windbreaker he wore the day it happened. Arms crossed, eyes red. He didn't speak, just watched. Then Logan stepped forward. He faced the cameras, hands in his pockets, and said, "What I couldn't. My sister didn't die because of a code violation. She died because someone believed visibility was an inconvenience. She died because aesthetics were weaponized. She died because silence was easier than truth. And now, you've all seen the truth. He stepped back. That was it. No statement, no applause. The projection looped once more, then stopped. I didn't speak to Melinda that night. I didn't need to. She'd heard everything, from the crowd, from the silence, from the voice she tried to erase now echoing off the walls she used to control. By morning, a statement appeared on the HOA website. It was brief. Effective immediately, Melinda Gratch has resigned from her position as president of the Black Ridge Dunes Homeowners Association. A transitional board will be appointed, and a full ADA compliance audit will begin within 10 business days. The board offers its deepest condolences to the Vellon family. No signature, no denial, just the beginning of the end. I printed the statement, folded it, and tucked it under the bolt that had held Ria's lift in place, the one piece I hadn't thrown away. Then I locked the gate, turned toward the sea, and let the wind take over. The city sent 2 inspectors the following week. Not quietly either. They arrived with press in tow, clipboards in hand, jackets marked, with ADA compliance badges. For the first time in Black Ridge Dunes' history, the HOA office doors were opened not to enforce rules, but to answer for breaking them. Logan stood at the curb watching with folded arms as the new interim board unlocked filing cabinets Melinda thought would never be touched. I didn't go. I was at the edge of the property, facing the sea. The balcony was gone, but the bolts remained, twisted metal sunk deep in the stone, the only pieces they hadn't bothered to remove. I had left them on purpose. Ria's recliner frame was gone, so were the rails. But I'd kept the bottom panel, the one her wheels rested on. It still held the pressure marks from her chair. I'd cleaned it, stained it, mounted it to a new frame. Not for function, just memory. And then I rebuilt it, not high, just enough. Just a quiet place to sit, facing the same sunrise she loved every morning. I had a new platform installed by a licensed ADA contractor the day after the resignation letter went public, fully certified, reinforced. The city gave it emergency approval without a single line of debate. This one wasn't for her. It was for everyone who would come after. There's something permanent about telling the truth in public. It carves into people. It doesn't always look like justice, not at first, but it leaves a mark, the kind that never really fades. The neighbors who once looked away now brought flowers. A few left apology notes. Others donated to the ADA legal fund in her name. And the board? Melinda never showed her face again. The house she'd lived in went dark 2 days after her resignation. Word spread she left town entirely. No forwarding address, no press statement. Just silence. But the silence no longer belonged to her. It belonged to Ria, because her voice still lived on every screen, in every reposted clip, in every hearing transcript and petition form that now bore her name. The woman they tried to erase had become the reason hundreds of others stepped forward. Stories poured in. Other HOAs, other balconies, other wives. One of the board members who'd resigned early, Jody, reached out privately. She asked for permission to submit the footage and case files to a federal housing oversight panel as a training case for what not to do in ADA-governed communities. I gave her everything. Then I went back to the cliffside, sat on the platform, and looked out over the water. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Not because it was over, but because it began with her. And it would keep going without me. If you've ever fought to be heard in a place built to silence you, or if you've watched someone you love be treated like a problem instead of a person, drop a comment below.